Well, I actually moved to Atlanta, Georgia from Louisville, Kentucky. Met the love of my life, who at that time had a 2.5 and a 1.5 year old son. We ended up getting married, and I raised her two sons as my own for several years until, unfortunately, my wife and I ended up in divorce. However, during the time that we were together, we raised our sons in a very, very affluent neighborhood. We made sure that we provided for them everything from a material perspective that they wanted. Um, as they reached the age of 8 and 9 years old, they became more and more, as most young kids do, fascinated by video games and whatnot. And as parents, we tried to monitor the type of things that they looked at video, the Teenage Mutant Turtles and those type of things. We tried to keep them as kids. Um, Unfortunately, as they began to get older, they became more and more aware of video games like Grand Theft Auto. My children had a couple of older brothers and sisters that watched these games, and they were of age where they enjoyed watching those games. And so my children, my younger children, started to view those things at their siblings' houses. Uh, as they came home and they became more and more aggressive about wanting to have those type of videos of their own, my wife and I at the time, uh, we tried to keep them away from those games. It got so bad, though, to a point to where our oldest child at that time, by this time he was 9 years old, going on 10. When we go to the video stores on a family outing to get videos that we could watch as a family, he always gravitated towards Grand Theft Auto and the more violent games, where we were trying to get them to look at things that were more family oriented. It got to a point to where it was so bad that he would actually literally cry and scream and kick and fall out on the floor and have a temper tantrum if we didn't allow him to get the Grand Theft Auto video. So it got to the point to where primarily my wife did not want us to be embarrassed in the store, so she succumbed to it and let them look at these video games, not thinking that it would do a whole lot of harm, because of the fact, again, we took them to church every Sunday. Again, we provided all the things that we thought good parents should provide them. So we felt, well, maybe the video game wouldn't do a whole lot of harm. Um, our younger son wasn't really into those type of things that much. He found other outlets that kept him grounded and entertained him. One of the things that we did not realize as our older son, his name is Eric, started to become more and more aggressive in day-to-day living. We started experiencing things with him in school. His behavior became more and more aggressive. Uh, the child, Brian is his name, was not into those type of video games and whatnot. His outlet was pretty much playing basketball. And we noticed a distinct pattern between the two, but still not enough to alarm us at that point. And because of the fact that my wife and I were pretty much not aware of all the things that were out there in surrounding neighborhoods, gang violence and whatnot, we just weren't connecting some of the behavior, that the changes that started to happen in our son. Um, I would say it was probably a year later, uh, the problems became more and more uh, prevalent in the area where we lived, which is just south of Atlanta, in Clayton County, Jonesboro was the name of the city, where it started to become more and more prevalent, and even became a focus of the local authorities, that gang members were beginning to move into Clayton County quite a bit. And they were even broadcasting on the news that kids as young as 10, 11, and 12 were being recruited into these gangs. So because of the fact that I pretty much watched news on a regular basis, I was seeing these things on the nightly news, and I tried to convey those concerns with my wife, that maybe we need to start being more and more cognizant of the type of activities that our children were involved in. Um, again, still not thinking that because of the lifestyle we provided for our children that it was going to be an issue. Um, but it did become an issue. Unfortunately, my wife and I did split up, and now it became a situation where even though I maintained somewhat of a relationship with my stepsons, it wasn't to the point to where I was in the house. So as my oldest son, Eric, began to grow and reach that adolescent age to where in his teenage years, he became more and more confrontational. I attribute part of that to the fact that uh, there was no longer a man in the home.
Now we say confrontational. Kind of expand on that. What do you mean by
When I say confrontational, things when I was living in the home, uh, we pretty much had chores that they did. They were respectful. They did whatever we told them to do, and there was more control over how they responded to us. Uh, I'm not saying that their mother was a bad parent. I'm just saying as they grew older, they began to challenge her more to the point to where even though I was no longer in the home, she would call me on occasion to come over and have discussions with, particularly Eric, about his behavior. She also recruited some of the neighbors that knew him when he was a young child and asked them to get involved. In other words, recruiting older people, men in the neighborhood that we thought would have a positive impact.
Now, was some of Eric's role models, were they a lot of the rappers that are out there?
Absolutely. Eric really got into that culture again. Our younger son, Brian, he was into it, but not to the point where Eric was. I mean, Eric wanted to emulate those type of things that he saw on TV. He even tried to rap himself as young as 9 or 10 years old. And again, as he grew older and older, the type of things that we didn't necessarily permit in our house, he found a way to get to those things.
Wow.
Whether it was through other kids in school where their parents didn't have a problem with those type of things. He found those type of people to gravitate towards, and he did. And again, even though we didn't listen to that type of music in our house, he found a way. And when we did become aware of those type of people that he started to gravitate towards, we did our best to isolate him from that. But again, as children go to school and they get outside the home, those are challenges that it's hard to really kind of put a check on. But one of the things when I look back in retrospect that I think that his mom and I could have done and probably should have done more of is to have more family type oriented things that he would enjoy just as much. We put a priority on making sure that the material things were there for our children that would not cause them to go out and rob and steal and do some of the things that maybe were promoted in movies or music or videos and whatnot. But it wasn't about providing the material things. With Eric, it was about the thrill.
Adrenaline rush.
The adrenaline rush. He as much said so as he grew older. It wasn't about the fact that we weren't providing him the type of things that he wanted. He found it to be a challenge to go out and do these things. He also developed somewhat of what I would call, as he grew older, a Robin Hood type mentality. In other words, it's almost like he felt it was his duty to go out and take things from people who had and give it to other people who did not. Part of that came with some of the people that he hung around with who did not have the lifestyle that we were able to afford.
So did he get involved in a gang?
He did. Around 13 or 14 is when it really started to permeate itself. Again, I was not living in the home, but the calls from his mother, desperate calls from his mother, became more and more numerous to the point to where I was going over there in the middle of the night to try and bring some stability into the home.
And you're 100 miles away, over 100 something.
Not quite 100. I was about 30 miles away from where they lived. And it got to the point to where she was having to call the police to come over, still with him being a juvenile, there were a few things that the police could do, but they pretty much left a lot of the controlling of his behavior to the parent. When he was, again, 14, 15 years old, the police were making regular stops at my ex-wife's house, and they would talk to him. And the first couple of years, he was still somewhat controllable, and the police would threaten him with this and threaten him with that. And again, they would tell my ex-wife there was only so much that they could do at that point because he was a juvenile. It became a point to when he became 15 that he was incarcerated in a juvenile home because it got to the point to
At 15, you
at
said?
15 because his behavior became more and more aggressive to the point that there was no longer any type of control that she would have. He became to the point to where he was getting angry enough to where he was becoming violent at home, literally taking his fist and busting holes in the wall. And she started noticing that he was coming home with tattoos on, the teardrop, things that are attributed to gang markings and whatnot. He would begin to tell her.
And he's utilizing drugs, I suspect, and alcohol at this time.
We could not tell that there was any drugs involved, at least based on the conversation. And this is still a 15, 16, where my ex-wife told me that she did not know of any drugs that he was doing. She suspected it, but she didn't know. But again, it got to the point to where she became afraid of him because of the way he acted. He began to bully his younger brother and bully her, and basically was holding them hostage in their own house. I mean, he would literally, if he saw something his brother had, he would take it and dare him to say anything about it. This was very much uncharacteristic of him. And
these are more characteristic of the game, and these are exactly the same type of things where the game Grand Theft Auto is, the whole theme is bullying others.
Yeah. And you know, we never, and I never thought, because there was always love between he and his brother. And, you know, they had a very strong mutual bond with one another, where I never thought that he would. And, you know, as kids, you always have older siblings and younger siblings that will do things, pick on and whatnot, that were harmless kind of things. But these were beyond that extent, to the point of where, you know, your brother gets brand new pair of tennis shoes, and you have a brand new pair of tennis shoes at the same time. But you take your brother's tennis shoes and you dare him to say anything about it. And if he did, then it became a very violent altercation, to the point of where the mother had to jump in between, and he would physically attack his mother. Again, things that I never thought that I would ever hear out of him.
And just to go back to the background, you two are very professional.
We are.
And you brought them up in a very loving home.
Very loving home.
And so your message to the parents is that, because you have a lot of parents out there that kids are involved in, you know, maybe getting involved in gangs, are saying, well, I got to work twice as hard to get my kid to the suburbs, and or to get them what they need so they don't have to go out, like you said, to buy. What would your message be, you know, to those parents? Because, I mean, there was at a time to where, yeah, you wanted to get these kids to escape the violent areas. But now with multimedia and the internet and the video games and the music coming through the airwaves, I mean, this whole thug mentality is entering into the home no matter where you live.
I agree with you, and that's one of the things. If I could give a message to any parent, there are a couple of things I would say. Number one, it's not enough to move them into an affluent neighborhood, because, as you just stated, it's everywhere. It doesn't have to be a physical location where they're exposed, because of the fact that internet has begun to permeate our children's lives. But be aware of the type of things that your children are getting involved in. One of the things, again, that my ex-wife and I, as we look back on what happened with our oldest son, even though we provided them with all the material things that a child could ever want in their life, in retrospect, maybe we should have focused more on maybe not spending so much time at the office and and having those 2 or 3 jobs to make sure that they didn't want for anything materially. We should have focused more on what they need from a love perspective. And again, we loved our children, but
And you took them to church on a regular basis.
church, they were in church every Sunday. Again, we were the typical family. Our sons always dressed in suits and ties. They were involved in church activities. We were involved in church activities. But again, one of the things that we didn't do enough of is we did some family outings, but as they grew older, we allowed them to start dictating how they spent their time. And again, I'm not trying to say that we shouldn't allow our children some freedom, but we need to make sure that the things that they're doing still have some innocence to them. Allow them to do some things that they want to do, but you need to monitor those things. One of the things that Eric used to tell my ex-wife, he felt that the things that she wanted to do was boring. And again, I think that kind of attributed to some of that excitement that he was looking for. We need to spend more time asking our children, what are some of the things that you want to do as a family? What are the things that you find exciting and thrilling, and make a better effort to participate in those type of things with them. Again, because something's going to have to fill that gap. I will say for those parents who, in our situation where my wife and I's marriage didn't last and the parents split up, whether they're your biological children or your stepchildren, if you told them that you loved them from the start, don't let your relationship with that spouse or ex-spouse, don't let that be a deterrent of how you spend time with those children, because it gives them a sense of betrayal when you told them that you loved them when you were in the house, and now because you and the spouse are no longer together, you separate yourself from them as well. It leaves a void, it leaves a gap that people who don't mean them the best step in and fill that void, telling them things that they want to hear. I'm not suggesting that a single home is a bad place for a child to grow up. I'm just saying that if both parents are not vigilant in how they raise the children and become an active participant in that child's life, there is going to be a gap. And you need to be careful who fills that gap. You also need to be careful about the parents of the children that you allow your children to associate with. Because one of the things that we found out is that even though these children are the same ages, or were the same age as our children, sometimes their parents have that thug mentality. And they, again, support that within their children. But if you're not aware of the lifestyle of the families that your children are hanging with, then you may be allowing them to go into an environment where these parents say it's okay for my children to listen to rap music. And when that happens, the kids tend to want it. When they start wanting to go to that house and spend more time than they do at home, then you as parents need to find out who these parents are that they want to spend so much time with, as opposed to spending time at their own home.
And you were mentioning that Eric a lot of time liked to be over his friend's house because the parents over there act more like their friends, or like their peers.
Right. And I didn't say it earlier, but again, as Brother Ray mentioned, my son was just murdered a couple of months ago. And what we found out was that the people that he spent most of his time with just prior to him being murdered had an opportunity to sit down and talk with the mother of the boys and young lady that he was hanging around with. And this woman, she was a single parent. And again, I'm not knocking single parents, but she basically was more of a friend to her children than she was a parent. She really did not try to provide any type of parental guidance to her children. She was comfortable with the lifestyle that they lived. And as a result of that, my son knew that there was no structure there. So he chose to go there as opposed to being home with his mother, who provided a very structured environment. So
he wanted, his mom to come down to that standard.
Well, he wanted
to work, and the perimeters were off.
Exactly. He even told his mother, you're dressed too old, and so and so's mother, was more hip. And again, my ex-wife, she was a very professional. She is a very professional woman, and the environment that she worked in, she would go to work dressed in a nice 3-piece suit or 2-piece suit or whatever, a nice pantsuit. And that's not what my stepson wanted to see. He wanted people to be able to say that his mom was hip and his mom was that, because that's what he related more to, more so than that authoritative person that his mom was. And again, we have to be very careful about not only the children that our children hang around with, but the parents of the children that our children hang around with, and what type of background do they have, and be more mindful of that.
And still, like I said, to this day, it's kind of an unsolved homicide with your son right now.
It is an unsolved homicide.
Maybe gang related.
I will say that, and I didn't say it, but 3 years ago, because of my ex-wife's job, they relocated from the Atlanta area to Fayetteville, North Carolina, which is where Fort Bragg is located. We thought that relocating Eric and Brian to that environment would be better for them because of the gang activity that Eric began to associate with in Jonesboro, Georgia. Unfortunately, that area actually had more per capita gang-related crime than the Atlanta market did. Because of and once he moved from Georgia, or they moved from Georgia, we thought that, again, not knowing the power of the internet, that they would not have the same contacts. But what Eric did was actually went on social media and searched out gangs in the area where they moved, and developed a rapport with the gang membership in that area. And as a result of that, became very active in gang activities there, to the point to where he was no longer going to school. Brian, on the other hand, again, who was not so much influenced at an early age with the Grand Theft Auto and other things, Brian still has some challenges as far as school is concerned, but he is not involved in gang-related type activities. He's a very upcoming basketball star, and like most jocks, his biggest challenge is making sure he stays focused on schoolwork because of what he's being told, he can get because he's a star athlete. But it has nothing to do with gang-related type activities. Matter of fact, when Eric tried to persuade Brian to get involved in those activities, Brian was very reluctant, and that actually kind of aggravated Eric, that Brian was not willing to follow in his footsteps. He actually tried to recruit his own brother into those type of activities, saying, man, you're a punk. His brother held his ground. His brother held his ground, even though it hurt him, because he did not like to see the way his older brother was now treating him and his mother.
And again, I just want to emphasize, this was not the inner city.
No.
You grew up in a nice suburb.
Very nice suburb.
And just kind of paint the picture for our audience, what type of neighborhood you raised your kids in.
Again, this is a neighborhood on the south side of Atlanta in Jonesboro, Georgia. It was the most affluent neighborhood on the south side of Georgia. Let me rephrase, one of the most affluent neighborhoods, not the most, not $1 million homes, but, again, the type of home that you would very much like to live in, 6-bedroom home, 5 baths, TV in every room, pretty much anything that they want. The neighbors, basically everyone is professional. Several of them own their own businesses. Some of them work for the government, for the military, for the most part. Very well respected people in the community. The neighborhood itself, again, was one of the most, and still is one of the most affluent locations in Clayton County. Probably second to a place like Lake Spivey for people who know that area, but very, very nice neighborhood, very nice homes.
Okay. Two loving parents,
two loving
parents. Church, education was emphasized.
Yeah.
So like you said, these outside influences is basically what you're giving many parents a warning about, is that watch what you allow in your home, because a lot of times parents aren't suspecting. No parent really thinks that a game like Grand Theft Auto, when they buy the game, because most parents, think that, a video game, how dangerous can a video game be, but we don't realize that a lot of times in these games, women are being killed, innocent people are being killed. And like I said, this goes oblivious to most of the public. When I explain to people what is going on in Grand Theft Auto, and most parents that even got this game, they said, I had no idea this was, they sell this game at Toys R Us. So why would I suspect these type of things were in this game?
Right. And the other thing too is, and I think I shared with you the other day, as I mentioned earlier, when our children were 8, 9, 10 years old and they wanted to see Grand Theft Auto, if you think about it, even in the school and on the news, one of the things that teachers will tell you as children are growing up, that's when their minds are developing the most. That's when they're easiest influence, like when you're teaching children a second language. Most students, or most schools rather, are doing that in elementary school, kindergarten, because they know that's when a child's mind develops the most. So if you take someone like my son Eric, who started off at 10 years old, 9 to 10 years old, seeing Grand Theft Auto, whether it was at home or whether it was over to his older siblings' house or cousins or whatever, that's the type of thing that was being put into his mind, and those things will help formulating his behavior as he grew older. And again, like I say, you don't think about when they go visit their older siblings or their cousins that these things are going on in their home. But again, you have to be cognizant of the people that you let your children associate with, whether it's their own peers or whether it's the parents of the peers. You have to be aware of where you're sending your children. And please, please don't allow the video games to babysit your children. It's if you have a big house like we had, don't put your kids in one side of the house and allow the video games and the internet to babysit them while you're off in another part of that big old house doing things on your own. Video games are nice, and obviously as parents, we want to make sure that we have quality time, whether it's with our significant others or whatnot. Don't allow the video games, the type of things that children are exposed to today, whether it's on the internet or video game, don't allow those to become the babysitter for your children. In other words, don't let them replace the time that you should be spending with your children. Find more family-oriented things that you can do with your children that will help you have, even if it's no more than a sit-down discussion with them. Ask them every now and then, what is it that you need from me as your parent to help you be successful in life? I don't think we did enough of that with our children, even though we were always telling them what we think they need to do to be successful in life. Substitute some of that time on the computer, even if that means limiting the amount of time that they're on the computer. Your children are going to bed, like a lot of times we would go into our children's bedroom in the middle of the night and find out that the video game is still going because they've fallen asleep with the remote control in their hand. Maybe we need to limit the amount of time that they spend with those things. Balance some of that time out. Balance some of the time that we spend doing other things as parents. Spend more of that time with our children. Give them more of our time. And again, asking them, what is it that we're not giving you? We're thinking that we're giving them everything. We need to be asking them, what is it that you would like to see us do more of that will help you be successful? And one of the answers that our children used to give us all the time is, I'm good. When your children say to you, I'm good, then you need to ask them, what does that mean? What does that mean that you're good? Does that mean that you have everything you need to be successful in life? Are you happy? Don't just let them get by with saying I'm good, because by saying that, we have no clue what that really means. And so I would just encourage you just to have more dialogue with them, and just don't make your conversations with your children so one way to the point where they begin to resent you, and they do seek places where they are able to be more vocal about what their life is like. As I mentioned earlier, those parents who basically have an anything goes type of environment. Your children are going there and expressing their displeasures at home. They need to be doing that with you, not with somebody else who really can't solve their problem. They need they need to have an environment where they're able to do that at home.
Well, I appreciate your time, Brother Mac. It's your humbleness and your transparency. And I know this is going to be a blessing to a lot of parents. And just a message that you just put out to our audience. And I know it's resonating with them right now. Just in closing, a few words you want to just say as we just close this session out. And I'm going to let you close the session out.
In closing, again, I just want to reiterate everything that I've said in this interview and this recording. It's not rehearsed. Again, even though he was not my biological son, as a parent, I will willingly admit that a lot of the hurt that I'm feeling today, excuse me.
It's okay. Take your time.
Even though some of the hurt that I'm feeling today, 2 months removed from my son's death, it's because I feel like to some degree, as much as we try to show our sons that we love them, part of my fault as a parent is I feel like I let him down because I did not stay involved enough in his life. It's not enough to provide the material things. I can't overemphasize the fact that we need to talk to our children more. We need to show them and again, if for whatever reason the parents are not in the same home, that parent who is a non-custodial parents work together with one another to make sure that you're filling that gap in that child's life. They'll make them feel like that they don't have a father or a mother figure that they can go to, because somebody is going to fill that void. And it's not always going to be the person that you want to fill that void. I'll never be able to hold my son again. I'll never be able to see him graduate from high school. But I do have one son left, and I'm doing everything I can now to correct those mistakes. He lives 400 miles away, but I'm not letting that be a roadblock to the time and the attention that I give to his life. I'm not letting my relationship with his mother be a deterrent to my ability to correspond with him. His mother and I have made peace with one another to the point to where we can talk about what's best for our child. And I encourage you parents that whether you're in the home together or not, be a parent to that child. Make sure that there are no voids in his or her life so that you're not feeling the same pain that I'm feeling.
Father, we just thank you so much.
Yes, that's all I can say.
There's no name above your name. I wouldn't serve any other name. Yeah, sure.
Are you experiencing voices in your head, sleep paralysis, fits of uncontrollable anger, constant nightmares, overwhelming fear, anxiety, and panic attacks? If so, good news. You're in the right place. God wants you and your family free. Look, demons are real. They're on assignment to cause sicknesses, violence, crime, tragedies, mental illnesses, and even premature death. This book, Demon Mentality Exposed, will give you a deep understanding of the diabolical mentality of demons through the narrative of an experienced demon deliverance minister. Evangelist Rayford Johnson is a retired correctional counselor and author who counsels and ministers healing and demon deliverance at correctional facilities, the streets, online, YouTube, phone prayer line, conferences, and residential settings. Learn how to safeguard yourself and your loved ones from demonic oppression, possession, and curses through the power contained in God's Word, the Holy Bible.
Mentality Exposed is a groundbreaking book that offers an honest and insightful look at the inner workings of gangs and their members. Author and certified gang specialist Rayford Johnson draws from years of experience working in one of the nation's most violent adult youth correctional facilities and provides a unique window on the psychological and spiritual factors that lead individuals down the path of gang involvement. This book is not just another academic study of gang behavior. It's a raw and compelling account from someone who has been in the trenches, working directly with inmates and learning from their experiences. From the pressures of poverty and violence to the allure of power and status, Thug Mentality Exposed explores the complex motivations that drive young people into the thug life. Whether you're a concerned parent, a teacher, or simply someone who wants to better understand this important social issue, Thug Mentality Exposed is an essential read. With its powerful insights and compelling storytelling from the author and inmates themselves, this book will leave you with a deeper understanding and solutions to address thug culture. Order Thug Mentality Exposed now in paperback and Kindle.
Introducing the powerful and captivating story of Ruben Palomares, a former LAPD cop who overcame incredible odds to find redemption. Follow his journey from the mean streets of East LA, through the ranks of his boxing career, and ultimately into law enforcement. But when tragedy strikes, Ruben's life takes a dark turn, leading him into a life of crime and despair. Yet despite facing brutal battles against unseen demonic forces, Ruben ultimately discovers a path to healing and deliverance through faith in his Savior. Join us for this ultimate tale of redemption, as Ruben Palomares rises from the dark pits of despair to become a true hero in his own right. Order your copy today of Redemption of a LAPD's Rogue Cop by author Rayford L. Johnson, on Amazon in paperback and Kindle.
Ever wondered why secret societies are secret? Why is it that an overwhelming majority of elite leaders in America, including those who've occupied the highest office, have belonged to an organization in the vast network of secret societies, whose rituals and teachings derived from the ancient mystery schools of Egypt and Babylon? Why is death the penalty for breaking a secret society oath? Why do they pay homage to pagan gods and goddesses? Why do many self-proclaimed Christians belong to these secret societies when their practices blatantly violate God's commandments, such as Exodus 20:3, which states, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me"? And why don't most of their pastors say anything about it? Is there a secret motive behind the positive PR that many of these secret organizations receive for their good deeds, such as feeding programs, scholarships, volunteering, youth mentoring, etc., that even the lower-ranking members of these societies don't know about? Could today's network of these secret societies be the architects and workers of the Antichrist New World Order, aka Illuminati, as prophesied in the Holy Bible? These questions and more will be answered by author and evangelist Rayford L. Johnson, who has spent more than 20 years researching, writing, and teaching on the occult. Johnson has counseled and ministered demon deliverance prayers on many former members of the occult. Many of them have testified that they have been set free by the power of Jesus Christ from the spiritual torment and generational curses that the pagan rituals and oaths have unknowingly brought upon them and even their family through the spiritual legalities of breaking God's commandments. As God's word tells us, it's the truth that makes you free. Get your copy of The Greek Letter Exposed today on Amazon in paperback and Kindle.